3/4 of the human population is suffering chronic stress every waking moment of their day. And when anyone goes into a heightened state of stress, which by that stat is 3/4 of the planet is in stress, they no longer have access to logic, reason, inspiration, intuition, and they don't have the ability to create. If you influence your brain in the first 20 minutes of the day, it sets a dominant state in the brain. And you're going to feel that way the rest of the day. When you change your emotional state, how you think about what your life is going to change. How you process the emotions going to change. The decision making is going to change. And when you start creating these changes, your life literally changes. And when it changes, you never go back.
All right, welcome back to the Better Human podcast. Like usual, we all have always amazing guests. And today we got Rudi Riekstins. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. And for the audience, I just did Rudi's podcast. So we'll drop some of those links in the show notes later, and we'll make sure that we direct you there, and had an awesome conversation. And with that, I was like, Rudi, you got to come over to me, and we got to pick your brain, and we got to get a little bit of your insight and tools on how to be a better human.
Well, I am just so pumped to have you. It was an incredible episode to have you on the show, and I would love your audience to come over and listen to you in the reverse, rather than you being interviewed, and all the brilliance that came from it. So thank you again.
Correct. All right. Well, for the audience, let me just kind of give you a little bit of an overview and read Rudi's bio so we all know who Rudi is. So Rudi is an entrepreneur, international speaker, author, and coach. He's been awarded the top 5 coach by Thrive Global, alongside with Tony Robbins, Jim Quick, Natalie Ellis, and honored by Business Insider as a top 20 thought leader in 2021, along with Deepak Chopra, Lisa Nichols, and Dr. Joe Dispenza. Man, Rudi, you are rolling with some bigwigs here.
You know, it was lucky placement. Let me say that. I'm just honored to be doing the work that I'm doing, and to be connecting with incredible people like you. And so I just say thank you.
Well, why don't we start with that? I mean, you and I are very similar in regards to the work and the industries that we're in. And, you know, how did this all begin for you? Where did you get exposed into this world of personal development?
You know, I love that question so much. I get asked that kind of question phrased very differently every time, but the end result is always the same. You know, I fell into this by design, and it wasn't my design. And so if I'm more clear, I would say I stumbled into self-development because it's what I needed the most at the time. You know, I was always somebody who was a seeker, somebody who wanted to know more. I continued to read and to learn and to grow. And at some point in time, you know, I used all of what I was learning to save my life. And when I say save my life, I don't mean my life was ever at risk of me taking my life, but the quality of the life that I was living was so bad. The pain that I was living in and through got to the point where I had to start taking what I was learning, what I was reading, and starting to apply it to my life. And that's a really important bridge, because a lot of people consume information, but not everybody takes the information and does something with it. And so, you know, I had to start reflecting and diagnosing and taking accountability for my life. And that's when my life started to shift and to change. And then when my life started to change, I started teaching what I was going through. And when I say teaching, I don't literally mean in the sense of being a coach, but I started with people that were around me, supporting them and nurturing them. And at the time, I was growing and developing sales teams. That's what I've been doing for 26 years. And so I would be in organizations, often as an employee, you know, running or leading a sales team. And then I would start coaching and supporting and mentoring the people that were around me. And then I started seeing their lives change and the value and meaning being added into their lives. And then one day I was just like, I need to stop and do this on a bigger scale. And so it really was a long journey of not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy, and then stacking enough evidence that, hang on a minute, you know, maybe there is some value here, and then putting that value into practice until I saw the external evidence.
Well, I would love to get some context behind that. But, you know, just before that, I love the way you've ended up in this industry, because, I mean, as a business, and we do coaching and training, as you know, we often get the phone call from facilitators or coaches and quotations saying, hi, I'm interested in facilitating and coaching. And I always ask the question, sort of, why? Why do you coach? Why do you teach? And it's the worst answer I get, which is, I love people. I love helping people. And yes, we all love helping people, but that's not why we fell into this, right? It's usually the coaches that sort of are doing the work and then go, oh shit, I'm actually doing coaching. I'm actually doing mentoring. I actually have tools and frameworks to teach, and then thereafter define themselves as a coach. But tell me a little bit about your story. So you were saying that it was, rough and, things weren't going well. Give me some context behind that.
I share very publicly that growing up in South Africa in a very difficult time period as we were preparing to leave apartheid, it was still very much a classist environment that I was growing up in. We were not the wealthy people in our neighborhood. We grew up in a really beautiful coastal town where there was just a tremendous amount of wealth. And so it was very glaringly obvious that people had wealth and we didn't have that level of wealth, which created feelings of unworthiness and unfulfillment within me as a person, within my family, to see my parents struggling to, pay the bills or to put food on the table. And when I went into school, our school was just a really interesting environment. And today I fondly look back at how it qualified me to be who I am today. But at the time, it was just a really toxic environment. The teachers were unhappy. They were mean. They were mean-spirited. My first grade teacher called me stupid and made me sit on a dunce's chair. She labeled me the stupid kid. I have shared that story so many times. I don't think I've ever shared this publicly before, but, I have a memory of her one day taking me, asking me a question, me not knowing the response, her calling me stupid, and then making me sit underneath her desk like a dog. And then I had to face all of the kids. And, I'm sitting under the desk, and every time I do something or the kids look at me, and she would lean down and smack me with a ruler and be like, keep quiet, like just constant belittling of you as a person. And so I processed a tremendous amount of trauma as a young boy, as I would imagine every other kid in my school at that time, because the teachers, it wasn't just me, it was everybody. And just being told repeatedly that you're not good enough, or that you're not smart, or that you're not worthy. The problem is, under the age of 6, you and I know this, we absorb all information as a fact. And so I didn't question the information. I just said, wow, I didn't realize I'm stupid. And so I started acting stupid. And when you believe you're stupid, you act stupid. When you act stupid, you become stupid. And so I never showed up for school. I mean, I was physically present in a classroom, but I didn't do homework. I didn't learn. I didn't put any effort in. College wasn't an option for me. We didn't have the resources to go. I didn't have the grades to go. I didn't have the belief that I could ever go to college, or that I would even have that as a possibility for me. And so for me, it was always just the hustle and the grind, and life was very, very hard. And in my 20s, that manifested in all of my relationships. I dated a slew of girls that cheated on me or weren't available to me. I had guy friends that were stealing money from me, or borrowing money and never giving it back, or, lying about things, like just constant relationships that I would put up with because I didn't believe that I was worth it. And so when I say today that I am able to support people because I've lived this life experience, there really are very few things people can bring up that I can't relate to in some fashion because of what my life experience has been, what I've experienced. And, I've just given you a snippet. I mean, we could talk about sexual abuse. We could talk about gun violence. I mean, we could keep going. But I can relate to so many people in life because of that upbringing.
Man, you were the definition of success, which is, the odds were against you. I mean, to go through that type of experience under 6, to then sort of live in the environment that I also lived in, the odds are against you. And it's amazing to see the success in this. And today I would love to find out sort of what are some of those tools, and how do you go about, and what are the frameworks that you use. I don't know if you've ever heard this. They did in quotations, an experiment many, many moons ago, I want to say in the 70s, where they took a teacher and they put her in the class, and they gave the teacher a list, and they said, listen, these are the kids that are stupid, and these are the kids that are smart. It was literally that list. And you went down the list and you looked at the names, and it had like smart next to it or stupid next to it. And what they didn't tell the teacher was they actually reversed the order. So the kids that were misbehaving and weren't academic and maybe a little more disruptive, they were labeled as intelligent and smart. And the kids that were really academically successful and in quotations, learned well, they were listed or defined as stupid. And they said, teach the class, and they observed it. And what they noticed with the teacher was how she changed the way she taught depending on who the kid was. So kid would put up their hand and say, I have a question. She'd look down the list and there would be Rudi. Rudi was labeled as stupid. She'd go, Rudi, not the time for you. And then they would lean over and they would look at another kid, whoever the name is, and she would look down the list and it was labeled smart. And she would then adjust herself as per that kid. And what they noticed was how the kids that were failing in school before or having challenges in an academic environment started to excel. And the ones that were excelling started to fail. And it all had everything to do with the way we engaged and taught. And it just really demonstrated the power of how we show up and the impact we have. We can have a positive impact on people or a negative impact on people. And you know that, right? Which is, it's not the school you go to, it's the teachers that you have.
I think that if anyone's listening to this and they are relating in some fashion, maybe it's a relationship they're in right now where a spouse doesn't see them for who they are, or maybe it's a parent or it's a sibling or a friend or a boss, or maybe it was their childhood and it was their school environment. Before we move over to the healing of any of these scenes or situations, I really like to bring a tremendous amount of meaning to every single moment, because I believe everything was divinely orchestrated. Everything is perfectly planned to prepare you for who you get to become. Today I get to support people. You do. You have an incredible company where you get to support people, and your impact is millions. But you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing today if you didn't have every single, and I use this all the time, seemingly insignificant moments that transpired in your life, because they uniquely prepare you for the person that you get to become. And so when I look at all of those scenes, yes, the school environment was toxic. Yes, it was difficult. Yes, it conditioned me. And yes, I showed up a certain way. And yes, at some point in time, I had to take accountability and shift it. But man, how beautifully divine was that, so that today when I work with companies, I'm able to support people inside of a business that also have had similar experiences. And for them, it wasn't a school teacher, it wasn't South Africa, it wasn't a classist, racist environment. No, it was their parents or it was their siblings. And so we get to create that shift. So if you're listening to this and you're hearing what I'm saying, first find the meaning in what you've gone through, and then we can create the shift in having the change in using it, because everything is teaching you. It's a vantage point to be able to learn and to grow. I share often a story, and I'm going to paraphrase it for you or for your audience. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but there is a gentleman that owns one of the largest magazine publishing houses in the world. And when he was in school, and he shared the story to his entire company. When he was in school, he was failing. He was just a terrible C rate student, definitely a Rudi. And when he had to study for SATs, which is not really something you can really study for, but doing the best he can to get his SAT score up. His mom was like ultimately saying he's not going to do well, and he's never featured in this, but he needs to do the best he can, and let's see what his grade is, and convincing him to follow through with it. And he does his SATs, and all of a sudden he gets his SAT score back, and he scores near genius level. And his mom's like, did you cheat? And he's like, no, I actually tried to cheat, but they put the desks too far. I couldn't see. And so I did the best I could. And he's just astounded. Holy crap, he is a genius. And so, he starts to ask himself, well, if I am so smart, how do I show up differently? And then, well, maybe I should start learning, and maybe I should start going to school, and maybe I should start being a different person. And then all of a sudden he starts getting A's, and then he goes to university, and then from there he goes to an Ivy League school, and then he graduates and he creates this incredible company. And all these years later, he gets a letter from the SAT board, and the letter says, oh my God, man, we have to apologize. 7 students that year received the wrong results, and you actually scored 700. And so he was back into the C category, except everything that happened after he got the near genius level test scores, he acted like a genius. And so the moral of that story is, when you act as you want to be, you will be. And what I love about what you do in your company is you hold people up to the vision of being the near genius. And that's the support. We just need that letter to come in the mail to create the shift, so we can create the change in the behavior.
Right. Isn't that amazing, huh? On how your mindset and your perspective is the thing that takes us through. I've heard that story before, and it's a very powerful story, and again acknowledges how much influence we have over ourselves, right? But we're fragile sometimes when it comes down to our confidence and our security, right? So what the healing process. This is what I'm interested in hearing more about from you. So what was that healing process for you, and maybe what are some of the tools or the frameworks that, you know, contributed to you managing and adjusting and you know, letting go of that trauma? I don't know if you can let go of the trauma, or if you could grow from the trauma.
You know, I do think that there is a letting go process to the trauma, but only after you've healed it. And so I love the way you phrase that. And let me tell you the other half of the story that I didn't, and it's going to answer your question. You know, so I left school and I was determined to become very wealthy. I believed in my limited vantage point at that time that if I became a millionaire, then all of a sudden people would look at me and respect me. And in my little mind as a little boy in a little school of a really small town, a millionaire was a really big thing. I thought if you're a millionaire, then you are successful. And so I became focused on becoming a millionaire. I didn't go to college. I went straight into work, and I worked my way up in every single company that I ever worked in, and I started building wealth. And at 25, I achieved what I set out to achieve, was to become a millionaire. And I owned a 2-story loft apartment in Cape Town. I had a sports car. I was wearing fancy jeans, and I felt like the king of the castle. And I'll never forget sitting down one night on my couch. I just furnished the whole place. I was, you know, about to celebrate who I am and who I finally become. And I started crying. And I realized, man, you know, I'm almost 26 years old, and like, I'm still that 6-year-old kid sitting on the dunce's chair. You know, my life hasn't created this profound shift. I mean, I have these monetary things, but my relationships are terrible. My business partnerships are terrible. I owned 3 companies at the time. I had 60 employees. And I sat there and I still felt like I was stupid. I still felt like the dunce. And so that night I actually pushed my dinner plate away, and I sat there and I took out a pen and a paper and I wrote out an entire list of all of the things that I had ever done that I thought I was worthy of. And I looked at evidence, stacking evidence. And the first question I asked was, if I own 3 companies and I started them, 3 companies, and I have 60 employees, am I stupid? And I wrote that out. Like, am I? Like, challenging the thought. Is it possible that I'm not stupid? And so I started answering the question. And then I started thinking, well, if 60 people come to work and I'm responsible for at least 180 people's livelihood, you know, extended to their families, then I'm like, if they trust me, I have to not be stupid, right? Okay, if I create it, and then I started listing all the things that I was able to do. You know, what made that list was that I graduated high school and I passed and I never opened a book. Like, I didn't even read any, like, you know, English literature. They send you off with like 8 books or 10 books you have to read for the year. Didn't open any of them. And somehow I still passed. I didn't study for biology, anything. I put no effort into my schooling and I passed, which means there has to be some intellect in me to be able to draw this information out. And then I started looking at my business partnerships, and then I started looking at the companies I worked in and the successes that I'd stacked. And I was like, hang on a minute, you know, I think that I'm actually not stupid. I actually think I'm pretty smart. And then when I started stacking more evidence, I started saying, hang on a minute, I'm actually pretty wicked smart. And, you know, I can absorb information in a really short amount of time, and I can challenge the status quo. And I'm in business meetings with people that are 40, 50, 60 years old, and I'm 25 and they respect me. I'm like, hang on, I have to be. And so everything changed that night. I didn't all of a sudden wake up healed and 100% confident, ready to go. You know, I actually recorded something just yesterday where I was talking to somebody and they asked me, when did I stop feeling stupid? And, you know, I never stopped feeling stupid. There are still days I wake up feeling like the dunce. There's still days where I have that limiting belief of I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. Or if my phone rings and someone says, hey, do you want to speak on stage with Brendan Bouchard? And I'm like, how am I ever going to speak on stage? What am I going to say that Brendan hasn't already said? And, you know, people are going to laugh at me if I come up there and try and add value after him. And there's the dunce. There's the stupid feeling. But the question really is not, do you still feel that way? It's how long do you allow yourself to stay there? And so I shifted that state of, I've stacked enough evidence in my life that I am pretty freaking wicked smart. And that I'm confident, and that when I show up in a room, I'm going to create an impact, whether that's my relationship, whether that's my family, or whether that's a business, or whether that's coaching, or whether that's on stage. And the beautiful part is it took me about 30 seconds to say yes to speaking on stage at an event with Brendan Bouchard and Owen McManus, and I could keep going through the list of intimidating speakers. But man, I went into that room and I left everything on that stage, everything on that stage. And, I was one of the fan favorites of the event. And I only share that because for 30 seconds, I almost said no. For 30 seconds, I almost allowed that inner child to be like, hell no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to jump forward. That 6-year-old self that was beaten down. And you know what? I overcame. And when I overcame, I stacked further evidence. And so, to anyone that has that healing process, I want you to know it's a forever going process, but you get to release that feeling. And the only way to do that is by actually asking more intelligent questions and looking for new information and then stacking the results of the things that you've done. I know it's a long response, but I want to just add in, because you started the question beautifully and you asked, can you ever let it go? And I have let all of it go. It doesn't mean it doesn't come back up, but I've let it go. I've left the attachment to it go. And so anything that's not serving me, whether that's a relationship, a friendship, a commodity, anything, I let things go very quickly. And if they're not in alignment with who I am, who I want to be, or where I'm going, then I let them go. And I no longer define myself with them. And that's the distinction of letting something go. When you create separation between you and the thing, separation between you and the event, the emotion, the limiting belief, and if you can create that space, it no longer is attached to you. You are no longer defined by it. And therefore, you can think void of whatever it is that's been impacting you.
It's probably one of the best things I've heard about limiting beliefs, which is, first of all, the exercise is to manage it, not to pretend that it's not there, right? Most people will learn things, or they'll come into it with the perspective of, oh, I just need to learn how to let this go. And then once I've let it go, then I'll move on and I'll never feel this way again. And, I hear your story now and I think about exercise, right? Like, this is, as long as you're exercising and you're working and you're following the process, you'll get faster and faster and faster at not becoming consumed by some of these limiting beliefs. But, it's a little bit of, I once heard the term unpacking your basement. Right. So in Canada, everyone has basements, right? And the joke about a basement is when you move houses, you usually have boxes, and you go and you take a bunch of those boxes, usually sort of grandma's china, and you stick them in the basement, right? And they just stack and the basement gets full. And one of the responsibilities we have as human beings is unpacking our basement. Right? Like, what is the shit that we've been building up in our basement that, if we're not careful, is going to be disruptive to our success or contribute to that limiting belief? And we got to go in, we got to open those boxes, we got to unpack them a little bit. And, just to continue the analogy, we got to throw some shit away sometimes, right? Doesn't mean that we don't do the work of the unpacking. It just now means that we got to continue to do it, right? Very cool, man. Super cool. Tell me a little bit about priming. I know it's a big piece that you teach and that you work. What is priming, and how do I use this?
Every single person on the planet is priming every single day. And I have coined a training, a state of being, a way to wake up every single day, and I've named it priming, because I believe everything in life, we either do it by design, intentionally, purposefully, carefully, calculated planning. Who do we want to be and how do we want to show up? So we put intent into what we're doing, or we're doing it by default. And my estimates are that 98% of the people on the planet are living a life by default. They are walking into a room and they are reacting to situation and circumstance, whatever's happening in that room, the emotions of in that room, and they then have to look at it and in a minute decide, how am I going to show up right here and now? And it's almost like plugging the ship while the ship is sinking. Instead of carefully, purposefully planning, how do you want your life to look and how do you want your life to feel? And so what I've done is I've bridged a lot of complex conversations like the brain, neuroscience and emotion and behavior, and put it into a really simple format for people to be able to shift into a state where they are their most empowered self. Everything about me is about in power, not empowered, because to be empowered means there's an external force that is moving you forward. You're being motivated. There's something that's outside of you. I believe everything is in you. That's why our podcast is Empowered Life. You're internally being empowered. And it's the self-propelling prophecy that I'm wanting to help support people with. And so to prime is to wake up in the morning and to understand a little bit about who you are, how you function, and how to set yourself up for maximum success. The brain is the most susceptible to change and influence in the very first 20 minutes of the day. And if you can change or influence the brain, it's going to change how the brain thinks and feels for the rest of the day. And the most powerful thing that we can do to create influence in our life is to understand the formula. Thoughts produce feelings. Thoughts and feelings drive all human behavior. Now, we can hear that. Thoughts produce feelings. So we have a thought. The thought then has an equivalent emotional influence, impulse that gets put into the bloodstream, and that's an emotion. It's a chemical that gets dumped into the body. So the thought is in the brain. Then we have the chemical goes into the body. The body then responds to that chemical, and then we have a behavior, the actions of how we get to show up. Industries, trillion-dollar industries are set up around, we're going to change, behavior, go to the gym, do this, eat that, drink this, take this thing. And that's all trying to create the action. But that never has long-lasting, sustainable change because people are trying to create a change. People have been who they were longer than they've been who they want to be, and so they're always going to default back if they haven't changed the formula. And so that's why people lose weight in a really short amount of time, or that's why people stand up for their self-worth in a relationship for a short amount of time, but then go back to dating the same kind of person again and again and again. And what we need to do is understand thoughts produce feelings, and then the thoughts and the feelings collectively, if we change one of those, it changes everything, and the behaviors are going to be very, very different. And so what I do is I support people that when they wake up in the morning, they influence their brain in the very first 20 minutes of the day. They change where they feel. They change where they process emotion. They also changing where their brain is responsible for making decisions. So they make bolder, more risk-taking decisions. They do things with creativity and inspiration. Coming out of COVID, the statistics are 75% of the human population is suffering chronic stress 75% of the time. 3/4 of the human population is suffering chronic stress every waking moment of their day. And when anyone goes into a heightened state of stress, which by that stat is 3/4 of the planet is in stress, they no longer have access to logic, reason, inspiration, intuition, and they don't have the ability to create. And so if you lose all of these unbelievable faculties that make you this incredible, powerful human being that you are, and you're in a heightened state of stress, you are in the default. You are just reacting. You're plugging holes. You're responding. And in most instances, when people are in heightened states of stress, the left and the right brain shut down and compartmentalize. They lose the ability to have the logic and the reason, so they can't find the words that they want to use to respond, or they can't think through the solution. And in that moment, their brain is in the fear, fight, or flight, and they shut down. They then fall into their default of either going to run, I'm going to hide, or I'm going to fight. And so they become aggressive or agitated at work, or they just cower down, or they just disappear. And so people don't understand why they're dealing with somebody that's erratic or somebody that's just missing, but they're in a heightened state of stress. And if we can change where you access the emotions, we can change where you access your thoughts, either of those two, it's going to change every single thing that you do in that day. If you influence your brain in the first 20 minutes of the day, it sets a dominant state in the brain, and you're going to feel that way the rest of the day. I work in energy. A tremendous amount of my work is in energy. And what I love so much about the analogy that you gave about cleaning out the basement is so many people don't understand the value of understanding two things. One is their behavior, how they operate. And then the second is the energy frequencies of everything that is around them. Every single thing in the universe is comprised of energy, and every single thing in the environment is all made up of exactly the same thing. And that is, atoms, neurons, electrons, protons, right? They're these molecules that just sit in suspended space. And the difference between any one thing is how many of them are jammed together at one time, and what is the frequency with which they vibrate? How are they moving? But all energy, meaning all physical matter, can be manipulated by pure thought alone, or by feelings. And the more you feel and the more that you think about what you're feeling about, the more you manipulate everything that's around you. I can walk into a company, and I do this all the time, walk into a company, and within about 5 or 10 minutes of walking the hallways, I can go to the CEO and say, hey, this is what's wrong in your business. Because I can feel what's the energy inside the company, like everyone's fearful, or people are negative, or people are overwhelmed, whatever the energy is. You can literally feel the actual palpable energy inside a space. The same thing is going to apply. If you don't clean out your basement, everything you've ever owned, ever touched, or somebody else has ever owned or touched, and you referenced, Granny's, kitchenware set, and that's china shoved into a box. That's got Granny's energy all over that, and that energy is influencing and impacting you as a person. And so the clearing out of the clutter and throwing some things away is clearing out that energy that you no longer need and then aligning with the energy of what it is that you want. And so the process of priming is to wake up in the morning and understand that you have 20 minutes from the second you open your eyes, the clock starts. If you pick up your cell phone, you're opening yourself to, influence. You're going to be reading about the latest shooting in Kansas City. You're going to read about the forest fires and the famine and all the stress, and your body is going to produce emotion around all of those things. And the minute you feel the emotion inside of the 20 minutes, the brain's going to say, oh, got it, Greg. That's how you want to feel today. Boom. And that becomes the benchmark of where you're going to be. Now, if something positive happens in your day, you're going to go up from that, but you're going to come back down to what is that benchmark.
That baseline.
And if something, and that's your baseline. And so you're going to stay at that level throughout the majority of your day. But if you wake up in the morning and you release stress, you release fear, you release anxiety, which is ultimately just doing a lot of deep breathing in and deep breathing out so that you can oxygenate the brain. I hydrate. This is a 32-ounce water bottle, and it has electrolytes in it. And I chug this when I wake up in the morning so that I can hydrate my brain so that my brain's working. I then do really deep breathing. And then I actually do an exercise where I imagine releasing stress outside the middle of my chest cavity. I breathe in clear, bright, white light, and then I release more stress, more fear, more anxiety until I become really still, really calm. When I'm really still and calm, void of my wife, void of her thoughts and feelings and what she dreamt about last night, void of my bank account or my calendar or agenda for today or the latest economic crisis, in that moment, I'm completely still. I am me in my most powerful form. Then I forecast a goal, a dream, or a vision. And I'm going to use a word that I want your audience to stick with me through the entirety of it because it's a trigger word. I will sit on my couch every single morning. I will reduce stress, reduce fear, reduce anxiety, find my what I call center point, and then I forecast a dream or a goal, and I do that fantasizing. Now, a fantasy in sexual nature is when a person creates a thought or an image in their mind, and that is usually sexually orientated, and it's about another person doing something with them or to them. And in that moment, their body physically alters itself. And blood pumps to different parts of the body and the heartbeat accelerates. And in that moment, they're having this ooh la la experience. And then they open their eyes and there's nothing there. But it felt very real to them. Well, what I do in the first 20 minutes of my day and what I teach people to do is to curate a fantasy of their life, not sexual in nature, but to physically move their physical being, their body, their energy to vibrate on the frequency of already having what it is that they most desire. And that feeling is the end result after you've already experienced it. And so if your goal, so as an example, one of my long-term goals is to be on stage in front of 85,000 people 40 weeks a year. So every morning I wake up and I don't go on stage in my mind in front of 85,000 people. I go to when I'm already at home. I've already walked off the stage. I'm talking to my family. I'm in awe of the event and the moment and the love and the fulfillment and the hugs and the kisses and the high fives. I'm already reading the love letters from the people who have come and have attended. And now what does that feel like? And that's the emotion I curate in the morning. And then I do that for every single thing I have on my agenda for that day. And I send that energy, forecasting it out and into what I'm about to do. I'm going to tell you now that exercise is not hard, but it takes work. And if you do that work every single day, you're going to live a life where you get to reap the rewards. I bring this into companies, and companies literally double, triple, 10x their companies in very short amount of time, and we never have to touch the product because all we're doing is supporting people. The latest data says that if you are happier at work and you bring more happiness into your work, you're going to be 70% more productive. And if your company is 70% more productive, you can just imagine what that does to the bottom line. And, I've worked with companies that have taken them from a couple $100 million into the $1 billion range. And all we did was supported them to prime their company, each of their employees every single morning. And I can give you from small business to big business, from solopreneurs to individuals to couples, just unbelievable results in the shifts and changes in their lives. Because when you change your emotional state, how you think about what your life is going to change. How you process the emotions going to change. The decision-making is going to change. And when you start creating these changes, your life literally changes. And when it changes, you never go back.
Well, Neuroscience and neuroplasticity is a lot of what you talk about here, right? Which is being able to change and develop those new neurological pathways. And if we run that pathway long enough, that neurological pathway becomes a neurological highway. It's not so hard to access that feeling or to focus on that goal because we're running the exercise. The pipe is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. How much, do you write down in the morning, from a journaling standpoint or list building, or is it really just sort of the meditative sitting and projecting it out into the universe?
I love that question. And so I do that. And I rarely mention that on an initial podcast because I think people need to stack a little bit of evidence that the process works before they build on the process. And so I'll tell you exactly what my routine is from start to finish. So if anybody wants to use it, I promise you this will irrevocably change your life and it'll do it immediately. You'll get the benefits of this the very day that you do them. It's not something you have to wait for because you're going to feel very differently. First thing I do when I wake up is I drink water to hydrate the brain so the brain's operating. I do deep breathing to get oxygen into the brain so that the brain is fully functioning. And if the brain's going to be the most susceptible, I want it to be firing at 100% of its function. Then I will sit down, I'll do the deep breathing in and out. I imagine clear, bright, white light entering from the top of my spine, traveling all the way down, filling up my body like I'm filling up a glass of water. Then I release any stress, fear, and anxiety outside the center of my chest. I make that color like a black or a dark color. So I imagine the dark leaving and the light coming in and the dark leaving and the light coming in. You can play with any color you want, but I do that so that I'm using that for my mind to be thinking about that and not thinking about anything else. Any thoughts that come into my mind, I just bless them, thank them, say, come back to me later, remind me at 9 o'clock. The brain is an unbelievable machine. And if you have a thought and you say to the thought, come back at 9 o'clock in the dot, that thought's coming back. And so people underutilize that value and just release it and let it go and it's going to come and support you. Then I create the fantasy of what is I want for my life. And this is where people get stuck. Some people will say, well, I don't have a long life goal of being in front of 85,000 people 40 weeks a year, so I don't know what to do. It's just about elevating your emotional state. It could be something that's happening in that day or in tomorrow or in 10 years or in a fantasy world. As long as you feel, the universe is not responding. The emotional state, the energy is not responding to the end result image you created. It's responding to how you feel. And so whatever you want to be feeling, gratitude, love, joy, fulfillment, it's going to react to that. It's going to change your physiology. Literally, your entire body is going to alter itself to match that frequency. I'm going to go as far as to say, if we took the latest medical equipment like EKG equipment and we scanned your entire body and we mapped out the energy of your body prior to you meditating, then we did it after you created a visualization in a fantasy format where your body physically alters itself. You're driving your sports car and your heart's pounding, and in that meditation, you're feeling the exhilaration of that moment. Your physiology's changed. If we scan you again and we show those two scans to a doctor, the doctor will say it's not the same person because the energy inside every cell altered itself. If you're in a good mood, all the cells in your body vibrate at good. If you're feeling happy, healthy, your body vibrates at happy and healthy. You start to say, I'm sick and tired of people not doing this work. And the brain goes, we want to be sick and tired. So the body starts to respond to sick and tired. So it's always under the emotion of the influence that you're feeling. Then when I'm finished the meditation, and, this could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours. It really depends on what's going on in my world. If I'm nervous or anxious about a project or an event or something that's coming up, I'm going to sit there until I'm 100% calm. Even though I've passed the first 20 minutes of the brain's influence, I'm just sitting there until I'm very still. Then I forecast that goal or that vision. And so once I'm done that, I have to take what's the ethereal, this thing that's just up in the air, and I've got to create something tangible out of it. And so then I actually write down I am statements. Now, we all know I am, two most powerful words. What follows them defines you. And so I will then reinforce things. Here's what's really amazing about that exercise. I've been doing I am statements for, 20, 30 years. My mom used to get me onto I am statements when I was a kid, and I did them on and off. But I never, ever kept any journals where I did statements. And in COVID, I started coaching not companies, but individuals. And so I would keep my little journals that I was doing in COVID, and then I would use them as a tool, and I would open them on a coaching call, and I would say to an individual, like, well, I'm going to pick any page, and you can read my private journal. And I would go through, and they would say, stop. And then I would stop on a random page, and I would read it to them. And so I started stacking these journals that I was just filling and throwing away over the years. And I kept it for that sole purpose. But about 2 years later, I was on the call with an executive of a company, and I said, I used to do this exercise where I would grab a journal and read it to people. And so I was like, pick one. And I grab a journal behind me and I turn it and I'm like, pick a page. And she picks a page and I start reading. And then I realized, holy shit, every single thing that I had written on that page, none of what was true at the time that I wrote it was all true at the time that I read it. Well, that's not true. One of them wasn't, but every other thing was, because I had one really big goal on there. And so there's something about taking the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and physically writing them down. There's one further step. You can actually stand up and change and alter your physical state. So if you were sitting, stand and read it out aloud, because now you're listening. So you've got your auditory senses, you're learning because you're rereading what you've written, and then you're buying and believing by inserting emotion into it. And so you're starting to activate all the senses as if the event has already transpired. And so it's kind of like taking the shoelaces and tying the bow. I have an entire program that people can buy on this, so a course they can download that comes with a journal, comes with meditations. And, there are people that do it and have great success with it. Or you could just do everything I just told you right now and write it down on a blank piece of paper. And it's just affirming who it is you want to be and putting it out on paper and then reading it out aloud and using that as like your guidance system for who it is you want to be. And that everything that happens in your day, you get to relay it back to that. Like, hey, the action I'm doing now, is that taking me closer to or further from what I created this morning in my routine?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Reiki?
Yes.
Yeah. And what's your thoughts on Reiki? Have you ever practiced it or
I haven't practiced it. I've had Reiki for years, but I haven't done it in a really long time.
Yeah. Because that's the concept of flushing out the negative energy in your system, right? Which is we go through physical challenges, emotional challenges, and, sometimes you get these negative clots of energy. But, what you're describing here is the ability to release that negative energy and then really refocus it into something more positive.
I do emotion code clearing. I wanted to interrupt there and I apologize, but just to make sure we don't skip over it. And so instead of Reiki, I've replaced it with emotion code clearing. And you can actually search, and there's a book called Emotion Code Clearing. Dr. Bradley Nielsen is the author. And he teaches you how to release emotion from the body, because we need to understand what is emotion. Emotion is just the intellectual interpretation of a thought. You see something, you think something, and then the body has to be able to respond to the intellectual information. So it takes the chemical, dumps it into the body, and then the body physically reacts, because the brain and the body are two separate functions. And so they need to be able to work together in tandem. And when you have an emotion, in heightened emotion, you retain long-term memory. And that's why we remember all the negative things from our childhood or all the high emotion positive things, because that's how we remember. That's the fastest way to learn. But what happens to so many people is they have a negative moment and that emotion is trapped somewhere in the body. And so it gets trapped in the shoulder, it gets trapped in the elbow, and then that turns to, tennis elbow or a torn rotator cuff or cancer. And we absolutely can release that emotion. We just need to understand, how do you go into the body to be able to do it? And that's a great resource. I highly recommend it.
Awesome. We'll make sure that's listed. So the routine for you, how long does it take each morning?
20 minutes on an average day. This morning my routine was 30 minutes. Yesterday it was an hour. A week before that, I was averaging around 2 hours a day. But it really depends on what I have going on. Now, I want people to understand what I mean by that. When I wake up in the morning, I'm 100% calm and centered. We all are the second we open our eyes. But in the first 20 minutes, the brain's trying to remember who were we yesterday so that we can be that way today. So it sees the side table, the spouse, the kids, the dog, and then it starts to remember all of life, your bank balance and everything that's going on. And then you start to feel the emotions dumping into the body. The brain produces 30,000 to 50,000 thoughts every single day. The majority of them are unconscious thoughts, and they are just happening again and again and again and again. But every thought is accompanying an emotion. And so we're not actually living in the present. We're 100% a construct of our past, because our emotions are our past. And when we wake up in the morning and we feel an emotion, our job in the first 20 minutes is to clear that emotion so that we are no longer attached to who we were in the past, so we can intentionally, carefully, purposefully, calculatedly plan, who the hell do we want to be today? And when I can release who I was and then sit there completely calm and still, and then I forecast that fantasy visualization of what I want my day to look like or feel like, or my big goal, my small goal, and then I just foster that emotional state in me before I do my writing exercise, I sometimes I got home last week and I've been traveling for 6 straight weeks. I was home 5 days in 6 weeks. I was 4 countries, speaking nonstop. It was absolutely grueling start to the year. And so for 6 weeks, I'm learning a different script on a different plane. I'm speaking for 8 hours in this country, then I'm speaking, 4 hours for this company. Then the next afternoon, I'm speaking 2 hours for that. And every single person has a different agenda of what they want. So that's a tremendous amount of pressure and stress, because I'm not saying to myself, how am I possibly going to speak for 8 hours and ensure that this company feels good about paying me my rate? I'm sitting there thinking, man, there's going to be 300 people in that room, and I'm responsible to show up for 300 lives. And if I don't take this seriously, and if I don't deliver, I'm missing an opportunity to do what I came here to do, which is to create maximum impact. And so there's a tremendous amount of stress and pressure that I wake up to. My pressure is not my bank balance or my health or my well-being. My pressure is like, man, am I going to meet the commitments of what I signed up for before coming into this body, before coming into this lifetime? And so I have to clear out that stress, because if I don't, that stress is going to go into my talk. That stress is going to go into my work. That stress is going to go into my marriage, my health, and my well-being. And so I have to zero that out. I have to clear it, separate the attachment from feeling that emotion so that I can curate whatever it is I do want to feel, whoever I want to be, so I can be that next.
And what I hear you saying, just to paraphrase, the pressure is good. It's now what you do with it, right? And it's the prolonged stress which is so unhealthy. But in some cases, it's the initial stress that gets us to move. It gets us to take that action.
Absolutely. 100%. I think stress is just an indicator of what you're thinking and feeling, and you get to ask yourself, is this what I want? And if it is what I want, then I keep doing it. If it isn't, then where do I want to create that change? My stress is about my commitment to being the best that I can be. And like you said, that fuels me, but I'm not attached to that emotion. I don't identify as a stressed person in that moment. I identify like, hey man, Rudi, you know what? Dude, you take this really seriously. You take yourself seriously. You want to create an impact. Where have you created an impact before? And then I can look at the evidence. And then I say, what is the likelihood if you put the same intention in, you're going to create another impact tomorrow? Yeah, you know what, I am. And now I feel differently about it. So I'm going to show up differently.
Right. And I hear even the language you're using is a lot of what and how questions instead of why questions, and the I am statements instead of, the why questions. And I teach something called the yes and instead of the yes but. Same concept as the I am, right? It's more firming in where we're going. Super cool, Rudi. I mean, what I hope the audience is really getting here is your success, your ability to manage these more stressful, negative emotions has a lot to do with the exercise and the effort that you're putting in. It's not this mystical thing that you just wait to feel better. You intentionally affect that focus, that energy, that emotion, that negativity into positivity. And that's the other thing that I heard you say here, which is it's not about just thinking about the positive thoughts. That's part of it, but it's about being able to release some of that negative stress and that negative emotion.
I want to respond to it this way. I was sexually assaulted, molested by an older female cousin, and I was 6 years old. And the reason I say assaulted or molested was because it was kind of weird. Like, she would take matchsticks and light them and then put them out in my genitalia. And then, it was like torture, but also totally inappropriate. And as a 6-year-old boy, not being able to understand what was going on, and then to have that trauma of being molested and then being forced to do what she had done, left me with a tremendous amount of emotion that I buried. And what's so beautiful about that experience is that 60% of the people I work with in corporate America today, majority of them leaders in companies, have been sexually assaulted or abused or raped or have had some kind of trauma, as it relates to that. And so because I've had that experience, and I started the podcast episode talking about our experience are always qualifying us. I'm so qualified to have a conversation with somebody who was, molested or assaulted as a child or as a grown-up, and to be able to say, like, man, I understand. Like, I've had a similar experience, and it qualifies me. And so I just described a really painful period of my life as beautiful. Now, I don't mean the act in itself, because it's clearly not. And that story continues, and there's no point in having it here today, but my meaning is that I have found a new way of looking at what I considered to be a really difficult experience. I had a man put a gun to my head when I was in my 20s. And he held me up in an armed robbery and he told me, close your eyes, it's the last thing you're ever going to see. And I got down on my hands and knees, execution style, and the gun's in between my eyes. And I feel the weight of the gun pushing in as he pulls the cock back. And that's it. That's the last thing I'm ever going to see. And my eyes are closed and I'm paying attention to the concrete digging into my knees as I'm on the ground. And I'm like paying so much attention to what everything feels like because it's the last thing I'm going to feel. And then nothing. And then I'm like, did he leave? And I just keep my eyes closed for like 2, 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I don't even know how long it took. And then eventually I open my eyes and everyone is staring at me and they've all left and he never shot me. But that moment was so painful and the experience and the PTSD trauma that came afterwards was so intense. But I'm going to tell you now, I send that guy so much love every single day because if he didn't put that gun to my face, I would never have woken up. If he didn't put that gun to my face and shook my core, I wouldn't be living in America today. I wouldn't have married my wife. I wouldn't have my kids. Like my life would look very different because I was so adamant to grow and make money and move forward that I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. And that man changed everything for me. And so instead of me looking back at a time when I had a trauma where I felt victimized and poor me, now I look back and I'm like, what a gift. When I look at my cousin who molested me, I'm like, what a gift. When I look at the teacher who whipped and chained me, I'm like, what a gift. When I look at the teacher who put me on a dancer's chair, I'm like, man, how uniquely qualified am I? And so when you assign a different emotional value to a situation, you're no longer beholden to it. And that's the beauty. It's talking about transmuting the energy around something. If you look at a situation, you feel like a victim, you go to the doctor and the doctor says you've got cancer and you're like, poor me, I'm a victim, I have cancer. Well, or you could say, I've made some choices that have led me to the path where I'm at. I've held on to emotion that is trapped in my body that has turned into this. And if I took this information and I did something with it, could I create a shift or a change? I'm going to tell you because I think some people need evidence. I've been in a room where for 7 days, people went into an emotional state to create a shift or a change in what we're talking about priming that had debilitating illnesses. One woman had 12 tumors and completely healed in 7 days. I've seen 7 people get out of wheelchairs who haven't been able to walk in years, ALS and other diseases, and they climbed out of wheelchairs and walked. I mean, to see physical changes happening in somebody because they changed something emotionally or mentally inside their body, and then the physical body altered itself to be able to create the shift or the change. This is profound work. When we understand that we have these life experiences, we feel a certain way because we viewed our world a certain way. Change how we view our world, and the world around us is going to change. But we have to do the work to be able to say, hey, where's the value and the meaning in this? And where's this taking me? And what is it qualifying me for? And if I can, which I can, what would I want to create the change in right now? And there's where your power lies.
Wow, super powerful. And, really the definition of emotional intelligence, which is this next piece, which is being able to process and manage and really project it into something different. Man, your story is super powerful and just incredible. Rudi, if people wanted to come learn more about you, they wanted to learn more about your coaching, they want to check out your podcast, they want to come check you out on social and website, how do people find you?
I would say, I'm on all social platforms at Rudi Riekstins. You can also go to my website, which is rudireekstins.com. That is RUDIRIEKSTINS, rudireekstins.com. It's one of those names that will forever be misspelled. But click the link in the show notes.
It's amazing. Listen, at the end of the episode, we asked the most important question, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
I'm going to say this. I think that if we all know what the true value and the meaning is of living a fulfilled life, we're going to teach other people through example. And the only way to truly teach and create profound systemic change is to be a leader by example. And that is to understand that to live the greatest levels of success in life is to give selflessly of yourself every day in every single way. If we wake up every day with the sole purpose of pouring into every single person we come into contact with. I woke up this morning and I had a pep in my step because I was going to be on your podcast today, man. I was like, make it better humans? Are you effing kidding me? Like, what is better than that? And so if we can make humans better humans, and that's our function. We wake up in the morning and we exceed that function, we're going to go to bed tonight and we're going to feel the most fulfilled. We don't go to bed at night counting our bank accounts. We don't go to bed counting these little, possessions and these things that are around us and where we went and who we went with. No, we think and reflect back on those moments where we truly created a profound impact. And that's the meaning of life, man, is to give selflessly of yourself every day, every single way, pour into people, love people. And in case you missed it, that loving starts with you first.
It's amazing. Rudi Riekstins, ladies and gentlemen. I told you it was going to be an awesome episode today. All right, Rudi, thank you. To the audience, don't forget to go check out Rudi's podcast. It's called Empowered Life Podcast. You could find it on all platforms. Go check him out on Insta and some of the other social platforms, Rudi Riekstins. And again, we're going to have all of that in the show notes. If you like today's episode, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share. Rudi, thank you for being here, my man.
I just want to say thank you to you and to your audience. Time is the most invaluable resource, and anytime anyone spends any time listening to something that you have to say or that I have to say, they're investing in themselves. It's a powerful declaration. But I just want to point out to your audience that the easiest thing that you can do to give back to Greg, who gives so selflessly of himself, is to rate and review and subscribe to his show, to share it with anybody. Man, to go in and just smash 5 stars right there is a game changer for him in sharing what he's doing. And it takes you nothing, no time, no anything. If there is any value that you've gained from this episode or any other episode, man, go ahead and smash those 5 stars, rate and review, because it changes the number of people that he can reach by you sharing that message, and it takes nothing. And so, I asked you to share selflessly of yourself. That's the easiest way for you to do it. Easiest, closest barrier to entry, 5 stars, man. Thank you so much. I love you guys.